So, COVID-19 and lockdown is now our new reality, which means that most of us are working from home. And what that means is not only are you avoiding the guy you used to try to avoid at the coffee stand in the office, you're also missing out on something, and that's an intangible that's important to a lot of businesses. And it's around culture and how do you keep a team together, how do you keep people sane, and how do you make sure that whilst we are all working virtually, we're also still working together at the same time and dancing to the same drum beat. So, joining us today is Deidre Jensen, who is from Game to Change, and we'll talk a little bit about her entrepreneurial journey, but then we'll also talk about this very, very big intangible, but an equally important part of modern business, in fact, of business, just generally speaking. Deidre, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for making the time.
The time and to share my story, and also just some insights that I've gained through this very interesting period of time that I think we'll all only experience once in our lives.
I would hope so.
So yeah, no, thank you, KG.
Let's start with your personal journey.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about the business, but also what life was before Game to Change.
So I was a consultant, and I worked for a big consulting company, and we worked like crazy on projects. I was in the training and the change side. And I realized that my personality, my creativity was all going to waste, and I felt very frustrated. I mean, I worked with some great brands, but I just, it's almost something in your heart of hearts that the longer you stay in here, the more your purpose is just being lost. Yeah. And I had a moment of, this is not for me, but what do I do now? And I decided to, I was working crazy hours, and I decided this is not for me, and I was lucky enough that I had some savings and I could take some time off, and I went on this discovery journey, doing all these crazy things, finding myself in this process. And in this year of contemplation and doing a little bit of consulting work on the side I was coming from a learning background and teaching people in corporate environments, and I used to sit in workshops and classrooms, and people would be like these shells. There'd be no personality, there'd be no engagement. And as a trainer, it's one of the most disheartening things, because you're giving everything. And then what I started to do is I started to bring games into our engagement, because I was just getting so bored myself.
Just to keep yourself away.
Yeah, exactly, to entertain myself. And all of a sudden, people who were these very uptight bankers, that have these alter egos come out, and people would engage in this process. So I thought there's something to this.
Yeah. And
there's something to how we teach people, something to how we look at humanity in the corporate environment. And there's just more to life than being this brain that sits behind
a title.
A title, yeah. Exactly that. So when I first started sharing this with my associates and my family, they thought I was crazy. I actually had my family and friends do a group intervention to stop me from...
Are you being serious?
I'm being dead serious. And I told them I'm going to make a business out of games and learning. They were, okay, Deirdre, we got to sit you down, because this is not going to work.
I'm just imagining this also. Hi guys, why are we here?
Genuine. And listen, it has been a tough journey. But every now and again, when I really hit a low point, I'd get a request or a client come to me, and I'd do some work with them, and it was just amazing. Yeah. I just saw what it did to people, and I think that kept me going. And I have had some very challenging times, and there's been a lot of educating of people of what more learning can be, what more engagement can be in this environment. And I think what's also helped me on my journey, because I started as a solopreneur, is how things have shifted. So how technology has also allowed a shift and a new way of thinking. And it's interesting because, when the whole COVID thing hits, I think we all like, what is life going to be about, or what's after this? You just don't know. It's such a huge amount of uncertainty. But it's almost creating this disruption where we can create a new playing field. Yeah. And as much as it's really challenging and it's really hard at moments, it's a wonderful opportunity to do things differently. And actually, for me, I managed to change how I did business, to do business better and to find better ways, and also to let go of how I thought things should have been done.
Right.
which is really interesting because we did a lot of tactile games. So we designed games so that people could, through the game, they'd learn and they'd also engage better. So we did a lot of actual sessions with people in it. So that was our business. 60% of our business was face to face.
And then you come into a world of no touch.
And then I come into a world of no touch. And luckily enough, I had some digital and IT experience, and I had 2 developers on my team. And I had to change. I had to okay, you know what? I've got to pay these people in my team. I've got to make things different. I've got to think differently. And it was really, I think for a month I was like a deer in the headlights. And then we started to really getting into the digital side. So obviously our face-to-face, and that's still there, and I'm sure it'll come back and we'll blend it in. But we've really just ramped up what we can do in the digital space. And I think when you really apply your mind to something and you really don't have an option, I really believe not having a plan B is probably one of the best ways to succeed as an entrepreneur.
Burn the boats. When you burn the boats, there's no way back.
Exactly, Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
I always remember that. And whenever, I was up in the corner, and I've had many of those corners where you've maxed out your credit cards, you've done everything.
Nobody's taking your calls anymore because they know you're going to borrow money.
No one's taking your calls. And you find a way. You always find a way.
Yeah.
So I believe necessity and really being up against the wall is where people really find the best versions of themselves. And it's traumatic. You might need some counselling afterwards. but you that's where you really innovate.
Yeah.
So that's been my journey, and obviously it started myself for 2 years, and I was doing everything, and I was in an office on my own, and I was just trying to sell this concept and educate people around it. And then we got a couple of really nice big companies who bought into the idea, and it's people who are willing to take a chance on me and willing for me to do something different, which is really unusual, especially in a corporate space, because it's almost risk avoidant. People don't want to put their neck out. But I was lucky enough that there's been a couple of sponsors out there who said, you know what, I think this can work, and I think you can do it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take a chance on you. And through them taking a chance on me allowed me to start growing this business and offering opportunities for people out there. So my other passion is there's such incredible graduates and people, and they just need the structure and the guidance to really allow their talents to come out. So we're a team now of 6. So and it really, it's not just me, it's the team. It's the people who come together, it's the people who bring it all together, and they have really been loyal. They have taken the knock with me during a time of challenge. And it's about finding your tribe and finding the people who you can create and make a difference in the world with what you do.
There is so much that you've given in that opening, right? That I'm just like, where do I even begin? Do we go into your story and speak to particular moments that you found really challenging? Do we go to how does one build a tribe? Because that's really what your business is about. It's not just gamifying for the sake of gamifying, but a component of that is how do you put teams together and effectively so. So I'm going to leave it to you. Do you want to take us to a moment, just from an entrepreneurial journey perspective, where you found yourself not knowing back from front, top from bottom? And if you don't mind taking us there, but also taking us through what you practically did. Because you know what I love? You go to these seminars, right?
Yes.
And they tell you the hero story. It's amazing. Like, oh my God, you started with nothing, you're now a billionaire.
Yes.
There's so much that's happened in between there. So if you don't mind sharing just one of those moments.
And I've had a couple of them, and they have been, they've been really tough moments. They've been moments where I started to take people on board, and I'm also very creative and intuitive, so sometimes my logic and my analytical side gets lost. So I just think I can do it. And then the practicalities, and I definitely found that bringing people, it brings a new level of responsibility. They've got families, they rely on you. And one thing that I did learn was how to be more plan around what you have, to have a buffer in place, because I did have a moment where I had a team, there were 3 of us, and there was nothing.
Yeah.
So client invoices were just sitting there, and I'd maxed out every possible form of cash to bring into the business. And I think it's those people, your support network, it's those people, and if you're really passionate about something, people will. You've got to be very humble. It's a very humbling experience because you've got to ask people, and sometimes they're going to say no, and sometimes, but in most cases, you know, if you're courageous and if you're resourceful, you will find what it takes to make it happen. And I mean, this happened about 2 years ago, and I mean, it was a very emotional moment for me. And I think I wasn't even worried about myself at that point. It was just like, how am I going to pay salaries? And I think what's also happened, and also maybe what's happened in the space, is before banks are very risk averse. So to get funding is incredibly challenging. And I've had so many things in my favor, and I found it incredibly challenging. So someone who hasn't had everything that I had, it's a really hard journey, and there's so many risks. You know, there's not people willing to take that chance, and you need that chance. And I had people around me who were willing to do that, and willing to help me take that next step, and believe that within a 2-month period I could pay them back and do all of that. But that was a very
alternate financing, as I call it.
Alternate financing. And what's happening now, it's very interesting, is that there are companies who are coming up and saying, you know, we can do this, we can do invoice discounting. You know, so I think that there's changes that are happening. While a few years ago there's a lot of rigidity in terms of what you could do and what you couldn't do.
And interestingly, I think those changes are coming as the result of entrepreneurial initiative itself. So it's not necessarily coming from your big corporates and your big banking systems. It's coming from entrepreneurs who've walked the journey and now at a place where they can actually say, you know what, I've been there. Let's create some sort of value for entrepreneurs who are walking through that space as well.
Definitely.
Tell me, when you say you had a year before sort of figuring it out, how important do you think that was for you, that year, and what happened in that year before you went into business?
So it was invaluable, because I think, I mean, everyone talks about purpose, and it's like, but I think you've got to know yourself. You really got to know yourself, and you've got to be very self-honesty. Like, where are my strengths and where are my weaknesses?
Who am I?
And it's who am I, but also knowing where you need help and where you can leverage. And also, I think for me, what was one of the biggest steps was being in a corporate environment. I almost think if you haven't, it's so much easier, because I had this is where I sat, and this is my role, and it almost like put me in a box, and I had to get out of that box. Because I thought, how can I go and speak to other CEOs? How can I go? I didn't, because I'd always been in this layered hierarchical system. So I almost needed to let go of that identity and form a new identity, an identity that was like bigger and that allowed me to explore more and be braver to step into new space. So I think it's really critical that you know yourself, and that you understand where your limitations are, because that's the only thing that's going to hold you back.
I think what I'm hearing is unlearning, right? I'm hearing personal development, which I suspect is a continuous thing, right? I'm hearing a bit of imposter syndrome as well, which we are all going to have. But one thing that stood out for me is in just the little interaction we had when you mentioned Tony Robbins. You know that there are very few people who will pick out things like that just based on a phrase. And for me, what it says is this person is invested in their own personal development. The fact that you reference Tony means that you're continuously doing that. So outside of the fact that you happen to work in the training and teaching space, what rituals do you do? What things do you have in place to keep you sane as the jockey of this horse that is the business that you're in?
So I realize it's self-management. So for me, I mean, I watch a lot of motivational clips on YouTube.
Hey girl.
High five. and there's incredible, and I think, you know what, you know the stuff, but you need to keep refreshing, and you need to keep inspired. And you need to find those people who've gone through those things that you think is impossible, because it is possible. So for me, that's invaluable. I think the other thing is just your own well-being, and it's very easy to get sucked up in everything and all the demands, because if you're not looking after yourself, and I've hit it a couple of times where I almost hit burnout, is making sure that you are centered. It's also about being mindful, being present, because you're dealing with people, you're dealing with stress, and how do you keep yourself grounded? And so one of my most, what I've learned in the last year is I've actually found this great Dutch guy called Wim Hof.
Okay.
And he's all about And I heard it a couple of times, regulating your nervous system through breathing. So the interesting thing is when we get panicked and stressed, it's very hard for us to get out of that through our heads. Breathing is one of the quickest way of us getting ourselves calm. And we don't do enough of that in our world. Our world is fast paced.
Yes.
And that, like just doing that practice, and he says cold water, it really like makes your nervous system more aware.
The lymphatic system also goes into it.
And you're present. You're more present. And I can tell you, I've had some moments where it's been really, like even with my team members, where they've had their own challenges and they bring it in, and you want to react, but you can't.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you do those practices to keep you mindful. Though sometimes, you are human.
That's the thing. You must. Nobody said we're perfect.
Exactly.
To improve, right?
Exactly.
I could spend literally this whole episode talking about like entrepreneurship and your journey. But let's move into your area of expertise, which is gamifying content and learning content, to be particular. But what I want to talk about is we are now in a world where we can't touch, where we can't be in the same offices because we're dealing with this global pandemic. What we're losing in that is, again, that intangible magic that makes a team, that makes a tribe. I love Simon Sinek, and I love a lot of his teachings and how he speaks about this golden circle and a sense of purpose and why, and how the tribe gathers around this why, right? Even in having that in place, when you're not in the same space with each other, how do you stay connected to each other? So my question is, what should we be doing to keep company culture, or to grow, or to create company culture in a time when we cannot be in the same space?
So I think that's very, and we as humans are social creatures, so we're wired for that. So this is actually quite a stressful time, and what the work we've done, I've done with my team and done with other clients, is we've used tools just to make people just relax, because it's so stressful. So we've actually found, we obviously use games as a way of learning and to engage, and we've actually found there's some great online games that you can play as a team. So we did like a Pictionary. So before, what happened when this went down, we were all working from home, and we had to connect through our team meetings, and we'd go online and we'd talk, and it was very like no energy. And then
unmute your mic. Unmute your mic.
Unmute. Phrase of 2020. And then we started to do these games where we played them, and it was also like sharing stuff about each other, and they're all online. And the team just started to have fun, and that energy came back. And that really was, I realized that people didn't dread those meetings. They started to enjoy it, and they started to also engage better with each other. So there's a lot of games that are really affordable, that's out there, that's online, that can create that social element between your team, because now they're not standing around the water cooler. Now they're not, having those after work drinks.
There's no Bosperats, there's no year-end functions.
So you've got to bring that sociable element, and it helps people relax, and it also makes them more comfortable having a screen in front of them. So it does, but look, there's nothing that can replace that one-on-one. So we're lucky enough, we're a small team. We obviously work from home mostly, but when we do get together, we try and maximize that time. We try and use it to brainstorm. We try and use it just to connect with each other. And my team was saying, you also get lazy and you just want to sit at home. And I say, no, you know what? We need to have, we're lucky enough that we're in the same area. We need to have regular touch-ins. It doesn't have to happen all the time, but we need to just see each other to work together. I think the other thing is we've almost got to over-communicate.
Tell me about that. What does that mean, over-communicate?
So when you talk to someone, and when we're having this conversation, we're reading each other's body language, we're picking up so much more information. And when you're sitting in an office together, you have that benefit. When you don't, it's so much harder. So you almost need to put something in a maybe you use an online meeting tool, but then we use an online project management tool where we put everything down to reinforce it. Everyone's got a WhatsApp group, but that also can be used for certain things. We've got a team, so we almost communicate. I almost say we've got to communicate things 3 times so that everyone understands. And it is more work. That's the. As much as we've got this spare time, we're not sitting in traffic, but we've actually got to put more energy and focus on communicating and working together to really make it at the level that maybe it was pre-COVID.
So part of sort of working with a team environment is that it's not always nice. So there's conflict that arises in in any team, in any healthy team. In fact,
Yes.
I would argue, right? For the leader or the business owner or the entrepreneur who doesn't know how to deal with crisis, as in deal with issues and people when things are bad at this time, what advice do we give to them? How do you handle bad behavior when you're not anywhere near each other, and give peace to the rest of the team and keep the team synergy alive?
Yeah, and it's a tough one because you know, if you're in the position where you can't have a face-to-face conversation and you've got to have a difficult or crucial conversation, you know, I mean, the best way is probably your online or video conferencing, because you do need to have that face-to-face, and you've got to gauge where people are. I mean, for me, it's firstly, you've got to keep people motivated. I think one of the key things in culture is people are feeling fear. There's a lot of fear, and it may not be verbalized, but it comes out in other ways. It comes out in not putting ideas forward. It comes out in holding back. It comes out in so many other. So I think you've got to give people a sense of comfort that if they show up and they're present, that you know you have their back.
I love that, because what I'm reading into that is that you're saying you almost need to create a safe space in the ether.
Yes.
Because again, it's virtual, so it's not like you can say this is a safe room that you walk into and everything said in here is fine. But you need to somehow inspire that it's safe. It's okay for you to communicate. It's okay for you to say you're stressed.
Yes.
Because what I've found, and my fiance, sometimes when we're working at home together, she is losing her mind literally because her workload has almost doubled. And I think not all businesses are aware of the psychological impact. But also what's happening is the employee is afraid of communicating that I can't deal with this level of pressure because job stability is a real concern. So I love what you're saying about create a safe space, allow people to be able to come into the words to share ideas or to share ingredients, but make sure that you make room for that. But maybe practically, what do? Do we create a session once a week? Is it a session once a month where people can come in and just have a catharsis moment, or what would be some great ideas around that?
Yeah, so we do a once a week session where everyone comes in and we look at an issue. I think the other thing is, I think you've got to create a safe space, but you've also got to create, like, this is our rules of engagement. This is how we show up, and this is some things, and this is around culture and values, and it's the things that we do. And what are those things that are, like, not negotiable? So, I mean, I'll give a practical example with someone in my team who had a very negative attitude, probably fear, but I had to have that one-on-one session to say, you know, the reason I'm bringing it up because it affects the whole team, and these are the ways, and give actual examples. So these are the ways that it comes out, and this is how it has to change. So you give people practical ways that they can change it. If you just make it a character attack, what does someone do with it? They take it personally, and it builds up. So I think you've got to give direction to say, this is how you need to show up, and if this particular behavior is not going to work for you and for the team and for taking us forward. So if people understand the bigger picture and why certain things have to happen, they're far more motivated to change their behavior. But it's a fine balance between motivating but also not letting, you know, things unravel at the same time.
It's a tricky time to be like.
Yeah.
Coming out of this period that we're in, there's going to be some lessons that we learn that will serve us well going back into sort of the work environment, the bricks and mortar environment. In your own observation, perhaps in your own team or with some of the clients that you work with, what would you say are 2 or 3 gems that we really need to leverage from having gone through this shake-up that we've gone through?
So I think definitely how we work. I mean, the work structure. I think the way of 8 to 5, that's changed. So, I mean, it's a whole output driven, but that also takes skill to do that and to manage it well. And I think people will have more flexibility and more freedom. I think there's a belief system that you have to be sitting at a desk for so many hours to get X out.
No matter what the research says.
Yeah. No matter what the research says. So I mean, that's what I say to my team. I mean, I've had to change my management style. It's been very hard because I'm thinking, well, this is your output, you need to deliver it. So maybe it's going to take you for one project 16 hours and you're going to have to work through the weekend. Or you might, what will happen is it's 2 hours and you get the whole day off. So it's kind of a balance, and I think that's also where employees have to manage themselves in that. They've also got to learn on their boundaries and how, I mean, as you're saying, your fiance working from home, and a lot of people just got so much more work, either through, companies getting more out of people, and it's how do you manage that so that you don't have a breakdown in that, because it's not going to serve anyone.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies are doing those resilience courses, but it's the practice, and putting to say, okay, I'm working from home now, this is where I work from home, I don't have any distractions, this is my time period, and there's a boundary between when I'm working and when I'm having my personal life, because I've worked from home and I found it one of the most challenging things.
Look, the fridge is right there, the
Yeah.
TV remote is right next to you, it's a very distracting environment.
And I found that when I was working, I was wanting to watch TV. When I was watching TV, I felt guilty that I was working, so I didn't have. And I think you've got to create like those psychological boundaries between the two. So I think it's definitely going to change how we work. We're going to have to put new rules in place, or
and different expectations of ourselves.
Different expectations. I think I almost feel like there's becoming less. Like, I know we work with a lot of clients, and before it was very much us and them, and there's almost like a merging between providers, clients. Everything is becoming this ecosystem.
Very fluid.
Yeah, and it was very interesting because we were talking last night with some friends around there. They've got Generation Z, and how people have all these different, they're influencers and they're doing translation. So I also think that the type of work we're gonna have people who've got multiple portfolios. And it's not going to be as structured as it was, let's say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, and like you said, then at that point, output is what you should be measuring. Not necessarily where that person is sitting in front of a laptop for 4 hours or 6 hours at a time.
Totally.
So, the great thing about conversation is you can always revisit it. So we're definitely going to have this conversation again. We're going to come back to it. Right? Because I feel like there's so much we can discuss. But there are 2 things that I want you to share as we wrap our conversation up. One is what it is that you guys do at Game to Change, right? So speaking specifically to what it is that your business does. But then, and we ask everybody on the show this. Looking back at the year that's been 2020, there's been so much that's happened, and a large part of it has been sort of unhealthy, for the lack of a better term, stressful. What one moment stands out for you, whether it's business or in your personal life, that you choose to take away as a positive out of 20?
So Game to Change, we are a creative learning and change consultancy, and we use games and experiential learning to facilitate better learning, engagement between teams. So we've actually taken a lot of our work now into the digital space. So we have gamified experiences. So if a client wants to learn about compliance, they can actually play a game on that. So, for any company who has content or learning that they really need to make more engaging and more effective, or has a message they need to get across or educate, we are very creative, and we do it in a way that makes it stick with people. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
Awesome.
And I think if there's one thing, and it's also been an incredibly challenging year, but the one thing that I look back, and I was kicking and screaming when this all went down, and I was like, but everything was working so well in my business, and then I just had to turf out 60%, and we're about to launch a new tactile project. But when I reflect on it, I fast-tracked things I should have done 2 years ago.
Right.
And unless this had happened, I think I would have just stayed in my comfort zone, honestly. So that's the one positive I take out of it.
Well, there you have it, Deidre Jensen from Game to Change. Thank you so much for giving your time and speaking so honestly. I love it. I love it. This wasn't an interview, this was a chat. I had a great time.
Excellent, thank you.